Yeah, as we mentioned in our announcement, we want to start off with an in-depth lecture about about each of the four GDP components. And during that lecture, you'll also have a few interactive and easy tasks to practice on the spot. And this presentation will be carried out by the one and only Shavarsh, who is an IEO International Board member and the team leader of Team Armenia. And after that, we'll have a practical training, so a workshop about how the government can stimulate GDP growth. And you will be able to discuss your ideas with the guidance of Joseph, who works on the Taiwanese Economics Olympiad and is also an international board member of the IO as well. So be prepared to do some activities, and without further ado, Shavarsh, the floor is yours.
Thank you for introduction. Hi, everyone. I hope those who enjoyed previous training, it was like successful enough and you had several insights. So as Anna already presented, I'm the representative of Armenia. I teach economics in British International School of Armenia, and also like IEO International Board member, as I already mentioned. So today we will have more information about GDP, the components of GDP. We will have both theoretical explanations, and we will have some nice practice questions, so we can practice our theoretical knowledge as well and see how this theoretical knowledge works in reality. So for that, let me share my screen and start. I hope you can see my screen. Yes?
Yeah, we can see it perfectly.
Thank you. So we will have like two main sections, as I said, like regarding to main components of GDP, like we will discuss the main characteristics of GDP and what kind of impact it has and what kind of factors has impact specifically on GDP. Also, we will see how real life works. We will have like practice question. Those questions will be like problems and analyzings. The first question that practice part that we will have, we will do it separately, like individual work. And the second one is going to be a teamwork. So Anna will organize a breakdown rooms, and you are going to have a teamwork as well. Why we decided to have both of them? Because as you know, during the IEO, you have a business case, which is a result of teamwork. So it would be better to start the practicing of doing teamwork right now. For those who joined the previous meeting, they already know about this information. However, as we can see, we have some new members, so I decided to spend about 2-3 minutes to just sum up the information that we had from the previous training, and it can be like a kind reminder for other participants as well. As we know, like GDP is one of the key measures of the national income. It's if someone asks you what GDP shows, you can just shortly say that it's the total market value of all the goods and services produced over a period of time. When we say a period of time, we generally understand during the 1 year. And the GDP we need to measure with market prices. So for calculating GDP, we use dollars or other currencies that we have in our countries. GDP has 4 main components. I hope you remember about the components, but let me remind you. The main components are consumption, investment, government spending, and the net export, which is basically the same export minus imports. So together, if we calculate the sum of these 4 components, we will have the GDP value of our country during the 1 year. As a first component, we will start from consumption. Each one of us as a consumer, we every day consume something, and we know that consumers are the main components of the economic activities. So the value of consumption is one of the main components of GDP as well. So what is consumption? Consumption is like total spending by households on goods and services over a period of time. So when we say households, we mean basically us, our families, those who are consuming. Just a reminder about you between differences between customer and consumer. Customer is an economic agent, like a person who buys something. Consumer is someone who is exactly consuming the product or the service. For example, if your mom buys yogurt from the supermarket, she's going to be a customer for the supermarket. If she eats the yogurt as well, she will become a consumer at the same time. However, if she bought it for you, you are going to be a consumer because you are going to consume the yogurt. So your mother is going to be a customer for the supermarket, and you as a person who will eat the yogurt will be a consumer. Actually, there are like numerous of factors that determine how much the household consumes, and this relationship between consumption and other factors we call consumption function. So basically, consumption function shows the relationship between the consumption and those factors that have a relationship with the consumption. As the main formulas that we generally use in economics are we are two main formulas for consumption. The first one is marginal propensity to consume, and the second one is average propensity to consume. So let's discuss each one of them. What is MPC? MPC is basically the proportion of a change in income that is spent. As we can see from the formula, it is change in consumption divided by change in income. So why do we need to calculate the change? Because we would like to understand if the income of people changes, how much the consumption changes. So are they ready to increase their consumption? Are they ready to buy more product and services if their income will increase? So the change of income, if we will calculate as a proportion of change of consumption, we will understand what kind of impact change of income has on the change of consumption. The second one is the average propensity to consume, like we call it APC, which is proportion of total income spent. As we can see from the formula, is consumption divided to income. So it's very simple formula. And why do we need this like calculation? Because we will understand how much income people spend on their consumption. Why we are saying income as a proportion of consumption? Because people will receive a lot of income, but they are not going to consume everything. So they can have savings to keep some money for future consumption. And it's really important for the governments, for the economists, to understand how much did they spend from their income, because it will help us to have prediction about future consumption. Also, how much the people have already spent as a part of their daily consumption. These are the main two formulas. I would like to ask you to have like a very like to be very attentive for those formulas, because we are going to have a simple problem for regarding to these formulas and calculate some things. So you can make notes if you wish, and I think we can go to the next slide. In this slide, I'm suggesting to practice our knowledge about MPC and APC. So I'm presenting you data about consumption and disposable income for UK, for United Kingdom. So before we will continue, let me tell you what is disposable income. If we take a look, the simple definition, it is the income after taxes on income have been deducted. So what does it mean? It means that if you receive income from your salary or from other ways, you need to pay taxes like income tax. And whatever will you have after paying the taxes, it will show your disposable income. So basically, disposable income is the amount of money that you are ready to spend. So you are ready to consume goods or to spend for the services. Based on these two columns, I'm suggesting to calculate MPC and APC for 1998, 2002, 2006, 2010, and 2013. I believe that if you have calculators, or you can use the calculators of your computers, you need to spend from 3 minutes to 5 minutes maximum. So please, based on our formulas, calculate MPC and APC for these years. I can remind you one more time the formulas. MPC is change in consumption divided to change in income, and APC is consumption divided income. So here is the problem. I think 3-5 minutes is enough. So let's start to do it. Later, I will share the answers with you. You will manage to check yourself. Also, we will discuss all the questions that you have. This one is going to be the individual work. The second one, we will have a teamwork. So please check the answers with your calculations and make notes if there are some mistakes. I kindly would like to ask to put plus or whatever you wish, if all the calculations that you did are correct, just to be sure that you did everything and all is fine. Awesome. We have several correct answers. Thank you. I think we can continue if you don't have any questions. Like, actually, it was very simple calculation, so I guess we can continue. The next component is investment. So we already discussed the consumption. Let's talk about the investment. I think each one of you had the chance to heard about investment when someone is saying we invested this money here, or government is saying we invested in this industry, etc. So what is like investment? It's very simple. It has a very simple definition. It's spending of funds on investment goods. So it's kind of the addition of the capital stock of the economy, and it has different examples. Like what we say. What we understand when we say capital stock, we understand factories, machines, offices, stock of materials used to produce other goods and services. So all these factors or these capital stock components are basically those minimum things that we need to organize a business. So we'll need to invest for this capital stock piles and to have opportunity to start our production or service providing. It's really important to understand the difference between investment and saving, because sometimes people think that if they save money is already an investment or future, but it is not the investment that we discuss in economics. For economists, investment only takes place if real products are created. So I have here like 4 examples for investment and saving. I will read each one of them and will ask you to write, is it an investment or is it an example of saving? So the first one is putting money into a bank account. What do you think? Is it an investment or is it an example of saving? Write in a chat simply. Okay. More? All right. we have only one person who thinks that it is investment, others think that it's saving. So let me remind you the definition. We say investment only takes place if real products are created. When we put money into a bank account, we do not create any kind of product here. We just put our money there. So it is an example of saving. It is not an investment. It's really an example of investment because they invest this money to buy a capital, to buy something that will help them to provide a service. So they will create a service which is a part of their economy, their business, and definitely it is an investment. So let's discuss the third option, buying shares in a new company. Is it investment or is it is saving? We have thousands of options, like saving, investment. More options, like trying to be more active because I would like to receive. Actually, it is an example of saving because we are not creating a real product in this process. We just are buying shares from the company. But if we buy a new machinery to set up a company, it is going to be an example of, what do you think? Right. Why? Because I need this machinery to provide a service or to produce products. It's very simple. So this is the example of saving. I would like to ask you, like, do you have any examples of investment or saving that you can write in the chat in your real life? No one wants to write an example? Maybe someone wants to talk if you don't want to write. Is buying an economics textbook investment to get into the IO? For your future, it's investment. If you are going to get an IO and the IO certificate is going to have several benefits for you, definitely is an investment for your future. Actually, you are not creating a product, so from the side of economics, it's not an investment. However, for your personal life, definitely is an investment. It is not a saving for sure. You are investing for your future career, for your future studying. Okay, thank you for the example. And let's discuss a nice theory about the investment. Generally, when we talk about the investment, it's important to understand the accelerative theory, because the idea that investment is linked to the change in output or income, it's exactly accelerative theory is presenting. We have the following formula for accelerative theory. When IT is investment in the time period T is a time, I think everywhere in physics, in mathematics, in economics, everywhere we use T as a symbol of time. YT minus YT minus 1 is the change in real income during year T. So it's actually during the time period. And alpha is an accelerator coefficient, or another option that economists call, they call it the capital output ratio. So based on this, you will have a chance to calculate the investment in a period of time. The next one is government expenditure, which is like a very interesting part as a part of GDP. So in modern economy, Government will fund like defense, police, court system, roads, or education. I hope each one of you like had a chance to use public schools, or to, I don't know, you definitely use the roads of your country, and or maybe like sometimes the police system, the police services. So whatever government is providing is a part of government expenditure or government spending. Why we call it government expenditure? Because government is paying for that. You are not paying for that to use the roads. You are paying taxes, but you are not paying for that like directly. So whatever government is providing you as a society member, for them is a spending, or with other words, we call it government expenditure. However, there are big differences between economies. So it depends from the type of economy, government spending has different structure. In free market economy, the government spending is in the lowest level. So basically, government is saying, hey, it's a free market. I'm not going to plan whatever you have, and you need to organize everything by yourself. In planned economies, when everything is planned by the government, the example of planned economy is, right now is North Korea, and before it was Soviet Union. As a part of, as an example of planned economy, that time the government spending is higher than for free market economy, because they are planning everything and they have to pay for the public services as well. In mixed economy is like in the middle. As you know, the mixed economy is example when you have both planned economy and free market economy. So in mixed economy also we have government expenditure, but it is not too much that we have for planned economy, and it is not too less that we have for free market economy. And it's important to understand fixed spendings with versus variable spendings. There are some spendings that government every time do, but if there are like unexpected actions in the economy, they need to pay for that as well. A very good example for that is COVID-19. So before, definitely, when we didn't have COVID-19, government wasn't expecting this kind of expenses from their side. They couldn't imagine that they need to pay for vaccinations, to have some scientific research, to have the medicines for getting people vaccinated, or to pay for their hospitals, etc. So it was a variable spending for them because they weren't expecting for that. However, a defense or police is a very good example for fixed spending, because they need to pay for defense or police every time. They know that they need to provide this service, and it doesn't matter do we have COVID or not. So it is an example of fixed spending. For like decisions about government spending, both taxes and government borrowing are called the fiscal policy of the government. If you start to learn economics deeper, you will have more information about fiscal policy, and you will meet the fiscal policy topic and the component and like more explanation about fiscal policy a lot. So it is just like a simple introduction about fiscal policy. You just can fix now that all the decisions about government spending that are made are part of fiscal policy. And because we are talking about government spending, it's important to understand the difference between budget deficit and budget surplus. So whenever we have a situation when government spending are greater than government receipts, such as taxation, we call that we have government deficit. What does it mean? It means that government could able to collect taxes, to collect a lot of money from the society. However, his spending was greater than their collected money, actually the receipts such as taxation. So with other words, we call it tax revenue as well. So in this case, if they are spending more than they are collecting, definitely they have a deficit. We call in economics that a budget deficit for the government. And the opposite, when the spending is less than government receipts, in this case, they will have a budget surplus. So basically, they receive a lot of money. However, they spend only a part of this money, so they have a surplus of money, which we call a budget surplus. So it's very simple. If you have more spending, we have a deficit. If you have less spending, you have a surplus. The next component for GDP is net export, or it's basically the export minus import. So first of all, let's together understand what is export and what is import. Goods and services that sold to foreign countries are example of exports. And those that goods and services that we bought from the foreign countries are a part of imports. So it's very simple to calculate your net trade balance. You need just to calculate the export and minus imports from the export. So the difference between export and import will show your net trade balance, which is a component of GDP. I would like to ask each one of you to write like example of products that you definitely know that your countries export from your country. And if you have information where are they exporting their goods, it would be really nice if you mention those countries as well. For example, my country is this, we export this product, and we export this product to this country. That's all, like only this information. What kind of goods do you Greece, olive oil? Okay. What else? What about other countries, or even about Greece, about more products? And do you have information, Vasilis, where do you export your oil? Russian goods to China? Okay. Russian gas oil? Okay. Export for Greece, we have fruits, Vietnam fruit, Germany has many cars too, yeah. Vietnam coffee, rice. As you can see, like you mentioned different type of products, Vietnam vegetables. So what does it mean? It means that if you're exporting something, you're really ready to produce this goods and export. You have a like surplus of the goods and you are able to export. And you are exporting, it means that there is a demand from the foreign countries. So they would like to import your goods and you're exporting it. So it's a part of international trade, and that's why is a component of the GDP, because if you have more export in your country than import, it's already good for your country. It means that you received more cash flow and you sold more products than you bought from the other countries. I think it would be better if we will try to practice our discussion about export and import, and I created a short task for you. The context of the task is the following. Armenia's economic growth rate of 0.3% in 2016 was the lowest it had been for the previous 16 years, except for the 2009 recession. As you know, 2009, it was a year that we had a recession in all over the world. The recent slow growth of real incomes was having an impact on the net trade balance. What is net trade balance? Is the difference between export and import. So based on this information, your task is to explain the likely impact on Armenia's net trade balance of the slow growth in the real income. So let me share the answer. Because it's analyzing, so it can be a little bit different, no worries. I just will share the main points that you should discuss. So here is the answer. Let's read together, and if there are problems or not clear part, just let me know. So as we saw, Armenia's economic growth rate, it was like 0.3% in 2016. So as it mentioned, it was the lowest one in 16 years. What does it mean? It means that it is likely that real incomes were growing at a faster rate for Armenia's main trading partners. And the net trade balance in the value of export minus the value of the imports that we already talked about it. For Armenia, its net trade balance is likely to improve. If real incomes are increasing at a faster rate of other economies, then Armenia's exports are likely to rise more than its import. So if the we said already that net trade balance is going to be improved, so it already shows that exports are going to be higher than imports. A faster rise in real incomes in other economies will cause those economies to take in more imports from Armenia compared to the extra demand from Armenian consumers of foreign goods and services. Armenia should experience a falling trade deficit or rising surplus. This is the main goal that Armenia needs to have after this all the analyzing. They need to they should experience a trade deficit so they can have a rising surplus as well. This is the main conclusion that we can have based on the data. I would like to ask, for each group, was it the answer similar to the options that you have in your discussions? Did we have similar discussions? And actually, it was the last part from my side. You will receive a home task regarding to my presentation as well. Anna will share with you later. And I think it was all. So thank you everyone for listening to me, for your active participation. And in case of any questions, every time feel free to contact. You can find my information in British International School website or ask basically Anna, or you can ask in I don't know, Telegram chat, wherever you wish. Every time open to stay in touch and answer to all the questions that you have. Thank you one more time, and Joseph, it's your time.
You now have a very clear picture of what GDP is, what GDP stands for, what GDP means in your or a certain country. So in this case, oops, okay, yeah, welcome to the thematic workshop. So over the following 30 minutes, or it might last longer if we can have more discussion. But anyway, the time frames for today are like these. The first 5 minutes will be for me to introduce some important ideas before you work on a small project with your teammates. Of course, it will be just like what we just had. You will be assigned to a group of around five people, and you will discuss with your teammates and formulate your concepts or ideas or even answers to a certain question. And then you will be coming back for idea sharing, and also I will be wrapping up information you can have for your takeaway today. Okay, so this is just like the overall structure of the second part of the meeting. Okay, so I believe you have no questions about what we are going to do later. So first of all, let's take a look at this. So I believe we have some beginners or some people who didn't join our first training ground meeting last time, maybe a couple of weeks ago. But anyway, we just talked about a lot of things about GDP. And to some extent, GDP can also be understood as another term, aggregate demand. And you might have a question about what that is. So in definition, it is the total demand or expenditures in the economy. So it's like everybody were not only individuals, but also companies buy a lot of things, and they also create their own demands. And these, when they all come together, this is just like the total demand of everything in the economy. And that's how we understand GDP in a country or in an economy. So yeah, this is everything you should have. And if you still have the ideas from the previous session, then you should know that GDP is composed of these items. Okay, so this is just like a review. We can go through this very quickly. C stands for consumption, I stands for investment, G stands for government spending, then X is exports, and means imports. Because of the pronunciation, we just make it like an X and an M, exports and imports. This is a good way to remember these short terms. Okay, so why should we tackle economic downturns? Because, you know, as for a lot of countries, as for some economists, they might think that, okay, maybe a downfall or a downturn in the economy is just something very natural, is something that is just pretty much a natural phenomenon overall in long run, because usually we can have ups and downs in our life, and that's the same for the economy. But as for some governments, or most governments in the world, this is not the case, because when there is an economic downturn, there might be a lot of people who can get laid off, they lose their jobs, and then they would have a lot of difficulty making both ends meet, and this would create a lot more difficulties for the government. And in this case, you can expect that the social stability or social security can decrease drastically, and this can further reduce the so-called aggregate demand. So you can expect that this is just like a vicious cycle in which things get worse. So it's like, okay, just like the case of COVID, we entered the economic crisis due to COVID around 2020, right? But it's not like, okay, we are recovering from the downturn very quickly, very fast. It's like we are still going through, we're making through the difficulty triggered by, economic difficulties triggered by the pandemic. And that is the case for a lot of countries in the world. Even the biggest economy of the world, the US, is also experiencing some ups and downs, where, you know, it is still on the way of recovering its own economy from the, you know, that kind of destroyed status of the economy. So you have to know that, okay, this might be something the government or a government should work on. Otherwise, you know, the social stability will be reduced, and this would be very, very problematic for the government to have to keep its legitimacy, for example, or maybe the next election they will lose, the ruling party will lose in the next election, like that. Okay, so this is just like a vicious cycle. With this visualized way, you can easily understand why the government should tackle this, should deal with this. Okay, so later we should focus on this. Graphically, it looks like this. I know in a lot of textbooks, you know, graphs looks very similar. And this is just like, you know, the idea of increasing aggregate demand. What does it mean by increasing aggregate demand? That means we have to put something in to make sure it can work out to stimulate the economy, or in other words, stimulate the GDP growth of a country. But how can we reach this? How can we set goals and reach these goals? So this is a question that will fall on you. So in this case, we will be divided into several breakout rooms. So currently we have around 25 participants, or maybe just 20 participants, excluding staff. Then you will be assigned to different breakout rooms, and this is your mission. You have to think about by what means targeted at any component in aggregate demand a government can stimulate the economy. So to understand this kind of question, you have to, you know, break down the question into several parts. For example, if you look at keywords like targeted at any component in aggregate demand, then you have to link this to, okay, aggregate demand, which is the same as the idea of GDP, and what's underneath the idea of GDP is the composition of C standing for consumption, I standing for investment, G standing for government expenditure, as well as trade balance. And then in what means, by what means. So you can also think about policy tools proposed by the government. And of course, there are two categories, just like what Shavarsh has talked about there are monetary and fiscal policies. So you can choose an aspect and think about how this can work for a country to stimulate its economic growth, especially under circumstances of the pandemic, or maybe that's a cyclic economic downturn. But anyway, in this case, a government should have the responsibility, according to a lot of people, the government should have the responsibility to get the economy dynamic again. So in this case, of course, we can't just talk about theory. We also want you to refer to real life cases, for example. So you can choose a country, maybe your own country would be a good idea for this. Okay, so I believe the mission is quite clear for you. And during the time you are assigned to breakout rooms, you can create a Google Docs or Google Slides. Of course, you are not going to type a lot of words or write something like an essay. You can put down some bullet points or maybe just some important concepts written in sentences, short sentences. And then when you are back in the main session, we can talk about, you can show what you have for us. Why should we do this? Because we are now doing training for the IEO, right? And as you know, there are not only multiple choice questions, but also what? But also, for example, open questions, as well as business case presentations. So you should know how to express your ideas in written format or maybe verbal, I mean, by speaking. Okay, so this is why we allocated this mission for you. Okay, so now we are going to move on to idea sharing session. When I was in the breakout rooms, I found a lot of very cool answers or cool ideas. You know, students, I mean, you really did a great job in terms of thinking different, like, you know, perspectives from different roles in the government, or maybe you were thinking about like different future circumstances when a government rolls out something to stimulate the economy, maybe positive or negative. Okay, so now we are going to let you say what you have. So, okay, so on my screen, can I introduce Vasilis Melasides to share what he or she has?
Yes, thank you. Well, actually, we didn't write down anything online.
Yeah,
I can tell you.
Okay.
I can tell you about our thoughts. Actually, we thought that probably lowering taxation. Oh, excuse me. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Good, because there was a problem with my sound. Sorry about that. Lowering taxation in the consumption goods would be a nice policy to increase the consumption by consumers, and so increasing the GDP in general. Also having a friendly towards investors would be a strategy for increasing the investment part of the GDP. Having decreased the interest rates would be, in the short run, a strategy for for the amount of money that is in the market, and so increasing the consumption and the GDP. Yes, those are some key points of our thoughts.
Okay, that's great. You talked about lowering taxation, which was a good mean to stimulate, for example, the demand for consumption. Then that means, you know, people would have more money to buy. Then this is a good way to stimulate the economy in terms of stimulating the C in the aggregate demand formula. Okay, that's great. Okay, I will be back giving some more feedback for all of you, but we have to move on to another team. Can we introduce Nguyen? Quyen? Sorry, I was trying my best. Your team, it's now your floor. Share what you have.
So our team, the idea of our team is actually something that our country has done. So Vietnam in the COP26, Vietnam has committed to stay net zero in 2025, I think. And this would help to stimulate investment value because net zero promotes circular economy, which is crucial in the future because it preserves natural resources. So I think that it would help countries from foreign countries to invest more in Vietnam because this country is promising a future, a greener future. So it's focusing on investment.
Okay, that's a great idea. In terms of sustainability, that's really what what a lot of enterprises are thinking about, because when it comes to their for example, social responsibility, they really have to take this into consideration, how green their energy is, how green their operations are, or how green or how fair the trade they are dealing with is. That's quite important. And you really mentioned the point that currently or contemporarily, a lot of enterprises, especially bigger or multinational enterprises, are looking at this. They are paying a lot of attention to this. And if Vietnam, is just like your country, can work on this more, maybe this is very promising for future economic prospects. That's great. That's a good point. Okay, so then that's a great idea. Then we can move on to Ronald's team. Ronald as Miraz.
Yes, Ronald cannot talk. He has a problem with his mic, but I am from his team, so I would speak for him if that's not a problem. We talked a lot, we discussed a lot about how to improve exports. Some of the ideas we came up with were protect developing industries through either subsidies or tariffs to prevent foreign competition. The industry argument essentially, and lowering taxes on firms in the sectors we want to expand to foreign markets. And also with regards to investment, we believe that there should be easier institutional arrangements for foreign investors to come in the country, and also easier access to loans through decreasing the interest rates, if and whether this is possible.
Okay, that's great. You just mentioned something that governments around the world are doing. They may adjust the interest rates to make sure they just to increase or decrease cash flows, or just how money flows on the market. For example, if you want more money to stimulate the economy, which means you are going to target, you're setting a goal of inflation to stimulate the economic growth, and of course you have to reduce the interest rate to let more money out from banks. That's a great idea. And also this can have short run or long run consequences or effects. That's a great idea. And okay, we can move on to the last group. Can you share what you have in your team? It's good one.
So like each of our member like have different ideas and like among those components. So firstly, I would share my ideas first, and yeah, if other members of my team are willing to share, they may do so. So yeah, so firstly, I think that the government can spend their money on like improving infrastructure, like highways, bridges, so that they can like stimulate the production growth. That is like besides the firm's responsibilities to improving machinery, computers, or robots. So also maybe there can be some like backs of investment and like support for the investment of machinery in like certain firms. Developing entrepreneurship is also one of our idea. There are some programs like for startups like Shark Tank and etc. that can promote like developing an economy. So it can be some like it can be seen as a kind of monetary support to enhance the business.
Okay, these are really great ideas. You talk about something a lot of governments are really doing in this world, just like, for example, in China, how they stimulated economic growth over the past few decades was mainly about, rolling out infrastructure programs, because this not only creates a good foundation for future economic growth, but also this also creates a lot of job opportunities for workers, especially in China. There are a lot of, the labor force is pretty huge, and there is a really big demand for this. That's true. Okay, so yeah, you talk about the government spending part, and that's great, because this is really what governments in the world are doing to stimulate the economic to stimulate economic growth. Okay, so overall, so does anybody from your team also want to share something else other than what you have? Because you just said maybe some other teammates would have different ideas. Oh, cool.
Maybe we should
Also,
monitor.
I'll talk about my part on the net exports, and I think of ideas that the government can stimulate the economy, particularly in net exports. For example, in fiscal policy, the government can increase their spending on funding exporting firms and businesses to increase their productivity. And an example in my country, Vietnam, is in agriculture. Our governments fund the building of modern machineries and harvesting methods in producing agricultural products to meet the standards of target growing countries like the EU and in China, Japan, and so on, and on advertising those products to foreign countries too. And in monetary policy, our country also creates special loans with low interest for small businesses to improve their productivity and to make their products export to other countries.
Okay, that's really a good perspective. You touched on the idea of trade. So maybe the government, okay, as for a lot of countries in the world, governments should work on promoting their products so that such products can be sold to foreign markets to stimulate net exports, for example, and this will further contribute back to local or domestic economic growth, because there is a higher demand overseas, then there would be more supplies for production dynamics for stimulating or to gearing up for gearing up further economic growth. Okay, I just saw Lucas raising his hand. Do you want to say something?
Yes. about consumption, we could increase consumption by more expansionary fiscal policy, especially in times of recession. That would end up increasing the GDP through public works or similar sort of things, to the extent that, of course, this is possible in not to have huge deficits or inflation.
So you mean reduce what? Sorry, we didn't get that.
So more expansionary fiscal policy that would increase consumption and investment, at least for a short while.
Yeah, that's
It
right.
would be useful if we don't have very big deficits and debt.
Okay, I see. Yeah, that's right. Logically, that's also very, very correct that we have to, do something to stimulate consumption and investment. For example, if the government has done a lot of things to increase what they have in government spending, but the government does not do anything about stimulating consumption or promoting investment, then maybe the effects of GDP growth should not be so satisfactory. So what you pointed out is very, very excellent. We should also look at or focus on what's much closer to our daily life, which means consumption or investment. That's right. That's great. Okay, so everything was pretty excellent. This is beyond my expectation. I originally thought that we would have a very, very quiet sessions. We would have very quiet sessions, but it turns out to be it really turns out to be that you had a lot of discussions with your teammates, and this is also very, very important when you take part in the IEO, because just like in the competition, you should work with your teammates from your own country, and you should also share something from your brain onto paper, onto a stage, showing your ideas verbally or with graphics or text on the screen. That's also what you will be invited to do if you are selected as a contestant in the IEO. So this is why we have everything like this in our training ground sessions. Okay, so as for now, do you guys have any questions about what we have today? Do you? So for now, we can just, this is our final part of the course today, the Q&A session. Originally, we at the very beginning, we had a breakout room session for you to talk about, what you have thought about in terms of the themes or topics relevant to GDP. And then we moved on to some other policy means or government policies that could help stimulate GDP growth. And in my session, in my part, I let you also talk about on your own talk about how your governments, especially in your own countries where you live, which you are familiar with, to show like local examples of how your governments stimulated GDP in history or today. So we really have a lot of good ideas today, and I really appreciate what you formulated in the group discussions. Okay, so as for today, do we have any questions? Okay, I think we have one in the chat. Political problems of governments helping boost the economy before we close, problems like corruption or not being experienced enough organizing. Do you mean inefficiency caused or triggered by this kind of activity, or what do you mean? You can turn on your microphone if you want to say something more about this. Yeah, that's right. When it comes to corruption, that's really a headache for a lot of economists, because this is just like something that can lead to a lot of externalities. For example, okay, we want this to happen in this way according to theory, but in the middle there is corruption. So there can be things are not that perfect, of course, but if there is corruption, things are even worse. I pour so much money into this in order to stimulate the economy, but a lot of money will be taken away from this and enter some pockets of officials. Of course, we don't expect this to happen, but this is really the case in a lot of countries. And so this is why you can see that maybe in terms of international collaboration for economic growth in a certain country, okay, there's something like the money coming from overseas or elsewhere to this country, but you don't really see this kind of help from foreign countries really pay off locally in the country which receives money from abroad like that. So yeah, this is really why just like in a lot of economics questions, there can be questions like, okay, can you tell me for example, what can trigger inefficiency in an economic setting? And this is what you just pointed out. That's pretty good. Okay, did I answer your question? Okay, great. Do we have anything else?